All right, let's talk about these two formulas we have for today. The first one is the distance formula, and the distance formula requires that we have 2 points given to us. So I've given you 2 points, and I've even given you the coordinates of them, because oftentimes when I'm giving you a distance problem, I'm not going to give you a graph, but this first time we should probably look at a graph. So I've given you the coordinates -4, 1, -1, 3. So my two sets of pairs, -4, 1, and -1, 3. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to find this distance that I'm putting here in green. How far apart are those 2 points? Now we can't just measure them because we really don't have a good way to do it, right? It doesn't go through at this nice even corner to corner, right? This line doesn't have a slope of 1. And we can see that it's just kind of awkward to look at. So off to the side here, I gave you some proof about why it doesn't work. And if you want to read it, you can. But it's just extra piece off here to the side. What's important to us is that we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem to do this. And if I use my highlighter, and instead of traveling on the hypotenuse, I travel, oops, I went too far, here on this right triangle between my 2 points, I could use my Pythagorean theorem to find it. I would say a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, right? Calling this a over here and calling this one b. And instead of calling the hypotenuse c, now I'm calling it d for distance because it's an actual space in space. So that I would say, okay, well, how tall is this side? 1, 2, 3, 4. Has a distance of 4, right? So A has a distance of 4. And then I would count on this line. I would say, okay, that's 1, 2, 3 units for B. And I would do 4 squared plus 3 squared equals, oops, d squared. I wrote a 5 because I know the answer already. We should have d squared. So that 16 plus 9 is 25 is my d squared value. And when I take the square root of both sides, I end up with 5 being the distance. Now I just told you a moment ago that I'm not always going to give you a piece of graph paper. But if I do, I would definitely use the Pythagorean theorem to figure this problem out. What if I don't give you a piece of graph paper? What if I don't give you space for that? When that happens, you want to use this formula. And it simply says that the distance is equal to the square root of, subtract your x's, then square them, plus subtract your y's, then square them. Which is really about finding that distance, right? The distance between 1 and -3, and finding the distance between -4 and -1 to find those sides. You can memorize this formula if you'd like, but you can figure it out also if you needed to. So to do the formula, we would simply say the distance is equal to the square root of, remember that we give ordered pairs, x, then y, x, then y. And it never matters which one you call the second point, which one you call the first point. So we need to take the x values and subtract them. So 10 minus 2 and square it, plus take your y values and subtract. 5 minus 11 and square it. So that my distance is equal to the square root of 10 minus 2 is an 8. So we take 8 squared plus 5 minus 11, that's negative 6, and square it. Now be careful. Notice I've used my parentheses a lot. This is one of those times where you have to remember that when you take a negative number and you square it, you get a positive value. So my distance is equal to the square root of 64 plus 36 which is the square root of 100, which is 10. Now, next video, let's just go ahead and do the midpoint theorem now. We'll do some more practice problems together. All right, so now we need to look at the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is asking us to find the halfway point on a segment. So if we have a picture like I drew here, where I have negative 1, 2, and I have the point 4, negative 3, I want to find this m. I want to know what are its coordinates. Now, on this problem, it's a little bit more difficult to find that halfway point, right? We could count it. I want to know what's halfway between the x values and halfway between the y values, so that I end up here at m. Now, when we say halfway or the average, we're talking about what happens when we add them and divide by 2. So the midpoint formula looks just like that. Add them, divide by 2, add them, divide by 2. So if I have 2 points, like 5, 7, and 3, 9, to find the midpoint, I take the x values and I add them together. So 5 plus 3, and I divide it by 2, comma, then I have to do the y values, and that's going to be 7 plus 9, and divide that by 2. 5 plus 3 is 8 over 2. So the x value for my midpoint is 4. And then 7 plus 9, that would be 16 over 2. And 16 over 2 is an 8 to get my midpoint. On some of these, you'll end up with fractional values. And I also want to do one that has a negative involved. So let's go ahead and let's look at number 5 together as well. In number 5, so we're trying to find the midpoint, so we can call it point M. We need to do x value plus x value divided by 2. And then we do y value plus y value divided by 2. Negative 1 plus 6, well, that's 5 over 2. And you can leave it as an improper fraction, or you can change it to 2.5 or even 2.5, since we're going to be looking at graphs potentially. Negative 4 plus 2, well, that's at negative 2 over 2. And negative 2 over 2 becomes a 1. Oops, my comma got off there a little bit. So that my ordered pair is one ordered pair. So I need my parentheses, and it's point M. The x value has positive 2.5, and the y value has a value of negative 1. I'll see you in class tomorrow, guys.